We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast. It's Thursday, January 8th, 2026, and we're coming to you live on rumble.com/amradpod and on YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. You can also check us out on X at amradpod and my own handle at Real Steve Friend. All right, guys, what are we talking about today? Because I feel like I'm taking some crazy pills. Not just because we're going to be talking about taking crazy pills, but there's just a lot of crazy stuff going on in the news today. And I want to take it out of what everybody's always talking about right now. They're talking about Venezuela or some fraud going on in Minnesota. What are we going to talk about, though, on the AmRad pod? Well, it appears that ADHD medication is working, but just not how we thought it was. Also, OnlyFans models are getting worker visas. The Washington Post is really big, sad over a tranny, and we're going to cap credit card interest rates for some crazy reasons. Understanding how rich the richest actually are, just to compare to the average American, and it'll blow your mind. And then California might actually be doing something that is sane. I know. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. All right, let's get after it. I don't know what the heck that was. My bumper music got all messed up. I'm all kind of jacked up. You know, when I was setting up my new studio, guys, my monitors had to get moved. So I'm just kind of all a little bit out of sorts. It's going to take a couple episodes, I think, to get back under control. I'll do my best. I'm depending on you all to be a little bit patient with me. But let's get to the first story of the day. And that was about this ADHD medication study that was done. Some research just came out. The Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. Headline: ADHD drugs work, but not the way the experts thought. Well, we had a long form talk about how ADHD is kind of not as it's been billed for the longest time, and how all these treatments were not necessarily doing anything beyond a couple of years. And really the ultimate takeaway was that people just had to adjust to the lifestyle and then they could focus. But now a little bit further research is indicating that, in fact, Ritalin and Adderall don't act on the brain's attention circuitry, but instead they primarily target your reward center and your wakefulness centers. Well, that's a little bit nerdy. It's a little bit scientific-y. What does it actually say? Well, the research pointed towards the important role that lack of sleep plays in the entire process. The stimulants are pre-rewarding your brain to allow you to focus on stuff that you don't necessarily want to do, but they don't actually boost your cognitive abilities. All right. So brass tacks, what does this mean? If you're sitting in a meeting that you don't want to be in, or you're a student, primarily this is who were studied, kids between 8 and 11 years old, and you're taking a class that you don't want to take, the ADHD medication, Adderall and Ritalin, they make your brain feel good about doing the material. It doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't actually make you be able to focus better, but it kind of gives you that delusion. Simultaneously, the researchers who did this study that the Washington Post looked into found out that a lot of kids are sleep deprived. And when you're sleep deprived, Adderall and Ritalin help. Now, what is the takeaway to that? Do not treat it like 5-hour energy. In fact, I think the more sane, less crazy takeaway would be a lot of kids need to get more sleep instead of getting hopped up on Ritalin and Adderall because mom and dad want them to score well on their standardized tests or bring their GPA up so that they can go to college. I remember being a kid and my mom was putting us to bed 8 o'clock, 8:30 until high school, even into high school, until I started taking advanced classes and doing a lot of extracurriculars and just didn't have as much time to do the homework. we were in bed getting 9, 10 hours of sleep every single night in the friend household. And we try to bring that forward to my household now with my kids. 8:30 rolls around, they're in bed, making sure they're getting 9, 10 hours of sleep. Now, how is this going to play out with kids who are doing a lot less? I mean, I know football season comes around for us. Pop Warner, we're rushing them home from practice, trying to get them to bed on time or reasonably close to the bedtime. But we hear from their teammates that those kids are going to bed 10, 11 o'clock at night, getting 6 or 7 hours. How many of those kids are now being tested for having attention deficit when they really just need a nap? All right. So that's the crazy pills that are going to inspire a lot of the crazy stories that I wanted to talk about. And the first one that caught my attention, it was percolating a little bit on social media, but I didn't see it catch so much attention that I want to bring it to yours because it might have slipped past the goalie. Comes from the Financial Times. This is wild. Influencers and OnlyFans models dominate U.S. extraordinary artist visas. This is dealing with work visas. Now, this is not huge. It's not in the hundreds of thousands or the millions. It's right around 20,000 visas got granted last year for extraordinary artists. But if it's going to OnlyFans models, I got a problem. The number of social media influencers who have successfully applied for O-1B visas reserved for exceptional creatives has exploded since the coronavirus pandemic. Essentially, what's happened is that your ability to use likes or views are easily quantified. And so the federal workers like to see that, and the lawyers know it. So the lawyers say, hey, look, this guy's getting so many likes and shares and subscribers, as you should probably do on the American Radicals podcast at AmRadPod. Well, that makes it easier to make the argument that this person is exceptional. High follower counts, big earnings can be used to establish commercial success and landing a contract to promote a brand. So being someone who runs commercials, that is going to be viewed similar to getting the part in some mega play or mega movie. We're just reconstituting and rejiggering the way that we consider people to be exceptional when it comes to art, as we're now in an increasingly digital age. And that's actually going to play into who we bring into this country, who is exceptional, who is not, who is going to help the melting pot, who is not. But let's be honest, you're crazy if you think that we need to bring in social media influencers from overseas or OnlyFans models. That's digital. It's virtual. It's like this podcast right now coming to you on rumble.com/AmRadPod and on YouTube, the American Radicals podcast. I'm in Florida, but if you're looking at your phone right now in Wisconsin or Rhode Island or Texas, I might as well be in the room with you. The same thing would apply to foreign influencers, I think. That was one of the takeaways when the Twitter/X revelations came out about how many accounts were publishing and posting things from overseas. It's one giant globe. I don't know why they have to be in America, even if it is only 20,000 of them a year. I think that the more reasonable, less crazy, absolutely sane approach would be we don't need exceptional artists. I think we got plenty of them here. I pivot over to the next one that I got. And I'm going to go to the Washington Post for this one. Said a lot of crazy stories, not really a lot of continuity on today's show, but I think that the overall theme would be people are nuts. So the Washington Post has a story about a dude who feels pretty in the state of Washington and likes to run races. And as Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, is wont to do, presenting him in the most sympathetic light possible. And that is referring to him as a her, and then also not telling you what his name was before, because that's dead naming, apparently. So the headline from the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness. For a young transgender runner, racing wasn't the hardest thing. The trials and tribulations of one, what's his name? Veronica Garcia. Veronica Garcia woke up, as she always did, on the floor, Her head hurt, her stomach cramped with hunger. It was the morning of her first race of the season, and she longed the night before to carbo load with Olive Garden breadsticks, but her family didn't have the money for that. Instead, the 17-year-old cooked up the only substitute she could find, a quarter pack of spaghetti with no sauce. So you feel bad, apparently, because the Washington Post wants you to, setting up the histrionics and the atmospherics here, because Veronica is poor, lives with a single mom, eventually in this story winds up getting evicted from his house. And you feel bad because it's a high school kid, but at the same time, we're going to link this to him feeling like a her, so we need to feel extra bad. Besides, if you're going to Olive Garden to carbo load, I have to question your judgment on health in general. But into the story a little beyond, Veronica looked at the awards that he had on his wall because he was a state champion in the 400 meters. But the Washington Post wants to argue to you that there's not a competitive advantage associated with being a dude who feels pretty. And what they like to talk about is how Michael Phelps, the guy who won all the gold medals for swimming, he's kind of freakishly built. He looks like a frog. I saw Michael Phelps once. I lived in Colorado Springs for about a year right out of college, and the Olympic Training Center is in Colorado Springs. It's 6,000 feet above sea level, so that can help boost your red blood cell count. So a lot of Olympic athletes train at the training center out there, and it's open to the public, or at least it was back then. And you could tour it and see the really cool facilities that they have. And Michael Phelps just strolled on by. That's a weird looking guy. His torso is extra long. His legs are kind of short. Apparently, his feet and hands are built like frogs, so he can paddle the water really well. And he has a competitive advantage because that's just the way that the good Lord made him. But I can't help but notice that he competes against other he's, and whether or not they have large fingers or freakishly short legs is not really as big of a deal as what they got dangling between their legs. But the Washington Post makes an alternative case. And in fact, says things like when you get dudes who start getting the hormone treatments and their testosterone drops and their estrogen level rises, that competitive level just tapers off. It tapers off to being only mildly better at sports than women. So we should just all be accepting of that. And again, to the crazy pills, beyond just the argument about men and women in sports, we're going to have to feel extra bad because of the politics attached to this, according to the Washington Post. So bringing it back up, headline: for a young transgender runner, racing wasn't the hardest thing. It was dealing with the president of the United States because he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler. According to the piece here, Veronica initially started running cross country and track as a boy and was finishing 417th place. And then he decided to compete as a girl and finished 13th place, later won a state championship. Again, no competitive advantage at all. And now to the politics, because Veronica Garcia lives in Spokane, Washington. Now, Washington is far left, but Spokane is relatively conservative. It's in the eastern part of the state. And according to this piece, at least half of the cars parked outside of her apartment complex had Trump stickers. And she knew that several girls on her team were Christians. Now we're back down to the Christian nationalism angle. So it has to go to the position of what is Veronica's comfort level. Now, when Veronica switched from the boys' team to the girls' team, she no longer had to wear a skirt and feel uncomfortable with the boys' practice. She could feel good about being with the girls. Now, the science, according to Washington Post, isn't really something that our president, because he's mean, orange, and literally Hitler, wants to debate. He signed that executive order, said no more girls and boys sports. They're going to use all the levers of power in the executive branch to do that. That's going to be through the Department of Education. And when Donald Trump signed that, he did it in the first month in office last year. The NCAA, which is the governing body of a lot of schools out there, said, all right, no more dudes who feel pretty in girls' sports. We're not going to allow the scholarships going out there. And that's when Veronica Garcia lost his opportunity to get a college scholarship to continue running against women as a collegiate athlete. And now with the NIL, name, image, and likeness time, who knows? They might be getting paid extra, not just additional to scholarships to college. You might be pulling down some endorsement deals. You might be like one of these artists, like the OnlyFans, who are critical artists and then pull down six figures. I mean, not a football player, it's cross country, it's track. But if you go to an elite school, I know in the Southeastern Conference, schools like Arkansas, maybe in the Big Ten, schools like Nebraska, they shell out a lot of money for those sorts of fringe sports. Stanford is another one. Stanford being in California, Northern California, relatively close to Washington. You could see a Veronica Garcia strapping on, particularly at Stanford, which is far left. But the NCAA said, no, no more. You're not going to be able to do that. And then they reflect on the success on the track. So in addition to going from 417th place to 13th and then eventually winning a state championship the prior year, now we're going to follow up with Veronica on the new season, the latest and greatest, where he competes against the same girl, same 17-year-old girl, that they're kind of rivals. They're 1 and 1A for who's going to win. And eventually Veronica wins the state championship race and goes to take the podium. And as you would expect, gets booed. You would expect and hope, because Veronica's a crazy person and the people that are supporting him are crazy people. Nobody in the room says, you're a dude, you can't switch to be a Sally. You're a Harry, not a Sally. It's not possible. It's not scientifically possible. You can grow your hair all you want. You can wear a skirt. You could even chop off your testicles and penis and have a permanent hole between your legs. That doesn't make you a woman. You have DNA that supports it. I thought the Washington Post was supposed to be the side of science, right? But that's where we are, taking more crazy pills and arguing on behalf of a dude who feels pretty, winning a state championship, taking that away from his closest competitor. Now, in her defense, the second place finisher not only didn't stand on the podium next to him, left it vacant, she got a college scholarship. So I guess there is a silver lining to this story. All right. Again, kind of a grab bag today, just lots of crazy stuff. Let's talk about some credit card interest rates now. It's enough of the dudes who feel pretty. So saw a piece over at Newsweek, but really it referenced a study from Vanderbilt University, and it is a bipartisan proposal to cap credit card interest rates at around 10%. Bring it up. The headline story is new VPA analysis finds that bipartisan proposals to cap credit card interest rates could save Americans billions of dollars. Well, that sounds good. That doesn't sound crazy, Steve. What's your problem with it? You always seem to have a problem. You're such a black pillar. You're such a black pillar who Dan Bongino probably wants to get rid of on social media. Now, late last year, Americans hit a huge milestone. The average credit card debt per household is over $9,000. Now, our total credit card debt as a country, as consumer debt goes, $1.2 trillion. Now, interest rates can range from like low 20s to, if you have a really bad credit score, can get up to 30%, which is bordering on usury, loan shark sort of stuff. But in this study here, there's now been proposals by both Republicans and Democrats, because they want to be populist and they want to be popular, to cap interest rates for credit cards at 10%. I got a couple of problems with this. This is flat out crazy for a couple of reasons. Number one, this is back to treating the symptom and not the problem. Why are we having record numbers of people in credit card debt? Because the economy stinks. Because people have too much month at the end of the money. Now, if you were to cap the interest rates, you're going to encourage people to incur more debt. When you have more debt, you're more leveraged. It gives you a lack of freedom to make decisions. Like if you're a government worker who sees a violation of rule, policy, procedure, or the Constitution, and you say, hey, I've got a reasonable concern. And then your bosses say to you, well, you sure? You sure you're not willing to put those innocent people in prison? You got a pretty sweet gig here. You want to give up that government salary? If you're financially beholden to others, if you have debt, be it mortgages, or in this case, credit card debt, you're maybe more inclined to just go along and be a good German. Financial freedom gives you freedom to make other decisions. We're not encouraging financial responsibility by reducing the interest rates. And I know the argument, you can't get out of hawk because the interest rates are too high. I get it. I get it. But it's a lifestyle change. If you're worried about the interest rates, which is pennies on the dollar and not the actual amount that you owe in debt, you have a prioritization problem. You hear that all the time with people with interest rates. Well, should I consolidate? I'm at a 6% and I want to get down to a 5%. You're arguing over one penny on every dollar. You should worry about the other 94 or 95% of that loan. Now, the study that was done by Vanderbilt said that it's going to save about $100 billion a year if you capped it. But there's a downside to that because banks are in this to make money. Now, if you force them to issue 10% maximum interest on debt, then they're just going to say, we're not going to allow certain people to borrow money. Now, I'm on record. I don't think you should borrow money at all, but I realize that I'm outvoted by evidence of $1.2 trillion in credit card debt. So let's recognize the battlefield conditions as they presently are. People are going to go into debt. They're going to use credit cards to do it. If they can't do that, then now you've reduced their ability to engage in any commerce. We've talked about stories before about how significant number of people, even going into Black Friday, were using credit cards and using layaway schemes to buy groceries. Now you're going to cut them off in general because they have a low credit card, for a low credit score. Banks are not going to issue them loans. They're not going to issue them credit cards. They're just too risky. It's not worth the squeeze to give somebody with a credit score of 500 a credit card when you know they're never going to pay the balance back. You're just not going to give it to them. You'd be crazy to cap this at 10%. The study said 15% would save Americans roughly $50 billion a year and wouldn't result in any people losing out on access to the ability to go into debt via credit card. So here's my compromise, and I rarely do compromise. I am, after all, a common sense extremist who says you shouldn't owe people other money. But I'll compromise in this one. Do it at 15%, not 10. 10 is crazy. All right. A lot of people are in debt, as evidenced by $1.2 trillion in credit card debt. I just want to do this, and this is kind of fun, of a ratio, a comparison to the richest people on earth, because I saw this reported in The Guardian about how artificial intelligence, the investments around it in the stock market, have artificially inflated the stock market. And I think, and I've made that case before, I don't think the artificial intelligence prospects are as good as the investors think they are. But for where we are right now, everybody thinks it's the wave of the future. And all of these tech companies have gone up astronomically in value. And the guys who own them or run them, net worth has just simply skyrocketed. So reporting from The Guardian, and have a nice picture of Elon Musk over there, who's back in good graces, I guess, of the presidential administration. The headline is AI boom adds more than $500 billion to wealth of U.S. tech barons in 2025. And that picture of Elon Musk, just so you know, his net worth went up, what was it? He went up to like over $600 billion. Musk's net worth, $645 billion. It was a 50% year-on-year increase in how much he is worth on paper. Now, again, it's investments. He'd have to sell, and once he started selling his stock, the stock will go down. So it's not really 100% accurate, but I am a numbers guy. So I asked the Google, I asked the AI a couple of questions just for perspective on what it is like to be Elon Musk and what he views as $1 million. Now, the numbers we have in this country are a little bit skewed because of the guys like Elon Musk driving it up. The average net worth of Americans is roughly $1 million in this country. That sounds crazy. I know. But when you get the Elon Musk of the world driving it up at the one end of the spectrum, it's kind of a little bit hanky there. So let's look at the median. net worth of an American, where you just list them all out from negative net worth if you owe a whole bunch of credit card debt all the way up to Elon Musk, and the one that's in the middle. And even that is skewed pretty far. But for purposes now, it's roughly $100,000. Or I'm sorry, $200,000. $200,000 would be the median net worth of an American. Elon Musk worth $645 billion. Americans, $200,000. Now, for perspective, $1 million to Elon Musk. What does it look like if you're an average American? That would be about 33 cents to you. 33 cents. If you're checking out at Walmart buying yellow tag beef and you see something that catches your fancy for 33 cents, you just pick up 3 of them, right? It's a round dollar. Buy it, throw it in your pocket, you got 3. That would be $3 million to Elon Musk. So for anybody says that, well, a billionaire, he doesn't need that much of a house. He bought a house for $25 million. That's like $8. Just crazy. It's unreal when you actually run the numbers on it. All right, I got a couple more. Let's get to them real quickly. And this one's a criminal matter, and is out of Massachusetts. So there was an aide to the governor of Massachusetts. Sorry, George Hill, you got a crummy governor there, who was busted for cocaine. And the state has wound up paying him out for his vacation time. Steve Friend can't get paid out for that by the FBI, over 400 hours of it. But this dude who brought in 8 kilos of cocaine to a government building is going to wind up getting paid out. What am I talking about? Reporting from the Boston Globe. Headline, former Healy aide Lamar Cook received $31,000 in leave buyback after his arrest on cocaine trafficking charges. We live in some very truly interesting times. So the police actually wound up seizing 17 pounds, which is 8 keys of cocaine that had been addressed to the state office building. He sent it to work. Maybe he was slinging the dope there. Officials from the state's Human Resources Division last month informed him that they had made a mistake and they wound up paying him $31,438 on leave buyback pay. So they're trying to get it back from him, but he has yet to make the payment. I think he's trying to hold back a massive amount of reserves as possible to make bail, which is set at $85,000. And state police have also refused to release records of a background check because apparently this guy, Lamar Cook, this wasn't his only brush with the law. He had a gun charge. He was involved in some sort of a robbery about 20 plus years ago. And the question is, did they do the background check? And if they did they give him some sort of dispensation for a violent crime with a gun? Massachusetts doesn't like guns very much. So why is he in the employ of the governor's office? All right, one more. And this one is actually a good one. It is a good, crazy one because it comes out of California, where they are primed to put on the ballot voter ID. You heard that correctly, guys. California has gotten enough signatures to put a ballot measure up that says you have to bring ID if you want to cast your vote in the Golden State. Headline from Reform California. California Voter ID Initiative surpasses 1 million signatures, headed for November 2026 ballot. They needed to get a little over 800,000 because so many of them will be repeats and tossed out for one reason or another. They have surpassed 1 million, but just to be sure, they are not stopping. They're going to get to 1.2 million to have a nice healthy buffer zone so the crazy communists out there can't kick this off. And they did it in 90 days. Just 3 months was all that was necessary. And now California is going to require you to bring some sort of photo ID if you go to vote at the polls, or at least that's what the ballot measure is. We'll see how the vote goes. Not going to be too bullish on that. It is, after all, supposed to be a blue wave come November, but good for them. I feel like I've taken some crazy pills today because this has actually gotten 1 million people to put their signature on it in the affirmative at risk of being named publicly. Good for you, California. Job well done. All right. That's going to wrap us up for the crazy pill episode today. But I do have a palate cleanse, and it's a fun one. And this is dealing with, I guess, you'd have to be a little bit crazy one way or the other, or both. This is what happens if you fly a drone and it runs out of batteries and is about to land in the water. What do? Well, this guy decided to get really, really wet. Great save. Those things aren't cheap. You don't want to have to put that on credit card again to get a brand new drone. He saved it at the last second, dove in the reservoir to do it. Well done, sir. All right, that's going to do it for us today on the American Radicals Podcast, rumble.com/amradpod, YouTube, the American Radicals Podcast. If you haven't already, give us a nice thumbs up, a follow, a share, a subscribe. Do all those things. We really appreciate it, helping us grow, trick those algorithms, and leave us a comment. I'm trying to be more diligent about that, to respond to your comments on it, and let us know what you think about the show. We will plan to be back with you tomorrow, Friday. And until then, guys, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals Podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.